Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if scientists might be making things more complicated than they need to be when they talk about their work? Well, this is a fascinating commentary that dives right into that. It is about how we talk about pre-registration in science, and why keeping that term, even when things get a bit fuzzy, might be super important. So, what is the big idea here? A group of researchers, Priya Silverstein and her colleagues, are writing to a journal called Advances in Methods and Practices in Psychological Science. They're talking about another paper written by Mayo-Wilson and others, the main point of Mayo. Wilson's paper is that the word preregistration is used in so many different ways by different scientists that it is causing confusion. They even suggest we should stop using the term preregistration altogether. But Silverstein and her team say, "Whoa there, hold on a minute." They think tossing out the word preregistration would be a mistake. They believe it is still a really useful term and they want to explain why. What exactly is preregistration? Basically, it is when scientists write down their research plan before they start collecting or looking at any data. This plan usually includes things like their research questions or hypotheses, how they're going to design the study, and how they plan to analyze the data. It is like writing down the recipe before you start cooking, so you know exactly what you are supposed to make. This practice has become pretty popular in psychology. The authors mention that in places like the Netherlands and the UK, over a third of researchers say they regularly pre-register their studies. That is pretty significant. But they also point out that the vast majority of studies published still don't have any pre-registered elements. Now, Mayo. Wilson's idea is that instead of using pre-registration for all these different things, scientists should be super specific. They suggest describing exactly what was registered, like a study protocol or analysis plan, and when it was created and shared in relation to the study. Silverstein and her team agree that these components are different, but they argue that pre-registration is still a useful umbrella term. It's helpful because it signals that parts of the research process have been decided in advance. This helps with planning and, crucially, it helps reduce bias. Think about it. If you decide how you are going to analyze your data after you've seen the results, you might be tempted to tweak your analysis just to get a result you like. That is like changing the rules of a game after it is over. Pre-registration stops that from happening. Silverstein's team believes that the best pre-registrations should include all these different pieces: the registration itself, the study protocol, and the analysis plan. But they also say that even a pre-registration that only includes some of these things is still valuable, as long as researchers are honest about what they did and didn't pre-register. They want researchers to be really clear about what they pre-registered when they did it in the research process where others can find it, and if they made any changes later on. Transparency is key. Mayo-Wilson's group also wanted to have a consistent term across different scientific fields. Silverstein's team thinks that having pre-registration as an overarching concept can actually help with interdisciplinary discussions. For example, psychologists can share how they use pre-registration to limit researcher degrees of freedom. That is a fancy way of saying controlling those tempting little choices scientists can make that might influence results. And in return, they can learn from other fields about how making pre-registrations public right away can help coordinate research efforts and prevent the file drawer problem, where studies with interesting or significant findings get published, but studies with null or negative results just sit in a drawer, unpublished, potentially skewing our understanding of a topic. So they agree that having clearer standards within a field makes sense, and efforts are already underway in psychology to create best practice guidelines for things like pre-registration. Now, let's talk about the pre in pre-registration. Mayo-Wilson's team finds it confusing because there isn't just one single event that pre always precedes. Silverstein's team acknowledges this is true, but they argue that this actually makes it more important to emphasize and specify the pre. To limit those researcher degrees of freedom or to help with study planning, the pre-registration has to happen before the activity it is meant to guide. For instance, just registering a study after it is finished doesn't help limit researcher choices at all. Its purpose might be more about making the study findable. This distinction is already built into many pre-registration forms used in psychology. They ask about when the pre-registration is happening in relation to data collection, access, and analysis. They also point out that the verb register can mean more than just putting a record into a registry. It can also mean to make a record of. So, pre-registration can simply mean making a record of something before the activity that the record is relevant to. This broader definition, they argue, covers all the ways pre-registration is used in psychology today. Now, they do agree with Mayo. Wilson and colleagues that the platforms where scientists currently register studies aren't always perfect. Some aren't searchable, some don't ask for enough basic information. Many put an embargo on when the information can be seen, and few have solid plans for keeping data safe long-term. There isn't even one place to search across all the different pre-registration platforms in psychology. They also mention that Stage 1 registered reports, which are a type of pre-registration, aren't always consistently registered, but they don't think these problems mean we should abandon the term pre-registration. Instead, they see them as opportunities to improve the systems. Pre-registration platforms and journals that offer registered reports should work together to meet higher standards. They suggest platforms could collaborate on long-term data preservation, find creative ways to balance making things public with authors' fears of being scooped, meaning someone else publishes similar findings first, and clearly distinguish between different types of registrations, including pre-registration. So, to wrap it all up, Silverstein and her team believe that the discussion about what pre-registration is, what it covers, and where its limits are, is actually helping science develop better, discipline-specific ways to do research transparently. They argue that we don't need to ditch the term pre-registration. Instead, we just need to be really clear and upfront about everything we do with it. To help with this, they propose a simple, short statement that authors can include in their papers to make sure everyone knows exactly what was pre-registered. They suggest authors should clearly report for each study. We clearly report what was pre-registered where it is available and any deviations that occurred after pre-registration. This commentary really highlights how important clear communication is in science, especially when we're trying to promote open and honest research practices. It is easy to see how different researchers or even different fields might use a term like pre-registration in slightly different ways. But, as Silverstein and her colleagues argue, the underlying goal making research more reliable and transparent is what matters. And keeping a good established term like pre-registration helps us talk about and improve that goal. So, what do I think about this? I think it is a really important point. The term pre-registration is powerful because it immediately tells you something about the integrity of the study's design and analysis. It suggests a commitment to a plan before seeing the results, which is crucial for avoiding bias. While I agree with Mayo-Wilson that we need to be more precise in how we describe our pre-registrations, throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as the title says, would be a shame. The pre is doing important work by signaling that something critical happened before the data could influence the plan. The limitations here, as pointed out by the authors themselves, are more about the infrastructure and practices surrounding pre-registration than the term itself. We need better platforms, clearer guidelines, and more consistent application. But the term itself, when used thoughtfully and transparently, is a valuable tool. What does this mean for us as consumers of science? It means when you see a study, if it mentions pre-registration, it is a good sign. It suggests the researchers put thought into their plan beforehand. And if authors follow the suggestion by Silverstein's team and clearly state what, when, and where they pre-registered, it makes it even easier to trust their findings. Future research could definitely focus on developing even better platforms and standardizing reporting practices, as suggested here. And maybe more studies can examine the impact of different types of pre-registration on the quality and trustworthiness of research. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think we should stick with pre-registration or move to more specific terms? Let me know in the comments below, and if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science explained simply. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.